Welcome to homework questions 66 through 70 for algebra. Question 66. If g of x equals the square root of x minus 7, find three things. First one is g of 8. So we'll plug in 8 wherever there's an x. Simplify 8 minus 7, and then what is the square root of 1? And the square root of 1 is 1. So that's all we're doing is evaluating three different ones. We'll do g of 32. So that is 32 minus 7. Don't take the square root until you simplify what's inside. So now we have the square root of 25, which is 5. So 32 is the input, 5 is the output. And then the last one, g of 80. We have the square root of 80 minus 7, and that will be 73. And then the square root of 73 is not a perfect square, so when you plug that into your calculator, we'll have to do an approximation. So we'll use the curly equal sign, and we'll just approximate to one decimal point, or the nearest tenth, which would be 8.5. Question 67. Solve each equation below and check your solutions. So on part A, we can combine our like terms, 6 and negative 3. So that's negative x plus 3 equals 10. We can then subtract 3 to both sides, and that will give us negative x equals 7. And that negative x we do have to get by itself in terms of x, so if we can divide by negative 1, that will give us x is equal to negative 7. And make sure you plug those back in and check your solutions. On B, we can go ahead and subtract 300. That'll leave us with 100x is equal to negative 100. So if we divide by 100, we get x equals negative 1. On C, a couple different options we have on this one. We can subtract 1/3 x. Remember, that's a 1 right there. So that's 4 equals 1 minus 1/3 is 2/3. So that's 2/3 x minus 2. We can then add 2 because we still want to isolate the variable term. 6 is equal to 2/3 x. Now we have a couple options again in terms of this. We can do this in one step or two. I'll go ahead and show you how to do it in 2 steps. If we want to get rid of the denominator, we can just multiply by 3. But don't forget to multiply the 6 by 3 also. You have to multiply 3 to both sides. So if you need to put a 3 on that side as a reminder, you can do that. And then now we can just divide by 2, and x is equal to 9. On D, we'll go ahead and add 2x to this side, or to both sides. We get 36 equals negative 1 plus 2 is just 1x. And we still have the plus 2, so now we have to get that taken care of. So we're going to subtract 2 to both sides, and that'll leave us with 34 equals 1x, or just x, is equal to 34. And so those answers are correct, but as I said, one of the parts of the directions say check your solution. So plug those back in and check so that you know they are correct. Question 68. Find f of negative 4 for each function below. So we're going to plug in negative 4 wherever there's an x. So on part A, it's the absolute value of the quantity negative 4 minus 3. And I'm just going to leave, remember, I'm going to leave the f of negative 4. That's saying when the input is negative 4, what's the output? So we'll simplify the absolute value inside first, and then that's the absolute value of negative 7, which is 7. So the input is negative 4, and the output is 7. For B, we have f of, once again, for all of these, we're finding f of negative 4 is equal to negative 5 times the absolute value of negative 4. Absolute value of negative 4 is a positive 4. So then we get negative 5 times 4, and that would be a negative 20. So the input is negative 4, and the output is negative 20. For C, f of negative 4 again is equal to the absolute value of negative 4 plus 1. isolate, or not isolate, but simplify inside the absolute value. So negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3, and then find the absolute value. So the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. And then the last one, D, we have f of negative 4 again is equal to the absolute value of the quantity negative 4 plus 3. And then we got a minus 6 on the end. So we still need to simplify inside the absolute value before we take the absolute value. So now we have the absolute value of negative 1 is 1. And then 1 minus 6 is equal to negative 5. So when the input is negative 4, the output is negative 5. Question 1-69. Graph and fully describe the function. Graph values of x from negative 3 to 3. So it tells you what to do. It does suggest also using the Desmos or the graphing calculator. So my suggestion is use the graphing calculator or Desmos to get the graph down, and then what we're really working on is fully describing this graph. So now that you have the graph, if you haven't done so already, pause the video, go through those questionings, make sure you're answering all of them, and then check your answers. And so here's the list that I created. The graph is U-shaped, also called a parabola. It opens down. I did also include on the bottom the graph is nonlinear. So we could have included that kind of all in the same statement, but it's there. X-intercepts are approximately negative 1.75 and 1.75. We're not really sure from the graph. Crosses somewhere in between 1 and 2 and negative 1 and negative 2. We know the y-intercept is at 0, 3. The vertex is also located at 0, 3 with a maximum value of y equals 3. So when we talk about max and mins, that's height. So that would be your y coordinate. No minimum value because the graph goes down forever. There is symmetry at the vertical line, x equals 0. So right here is where that symmetry occurs. And I think that's about it. So if you included other things, that's fine, but really those are the ones that we continue to focus on. Question 70. Find the corresponding inputs and outputs for the following functions. If there is no solution, explain why not. Be careful. In some cases, the no solution or more than one possible. There might be a no solution or more than one possible solution. I think that's worded incorrectly there. On part A, x is equal to 8, so we're going to come down here. Wherever there's an x, we replace it with 8. So what is the absolute value of 8? And that is 8. So f of 8 equals 8. On B, now it's looking at the other way. It's saying that, hey, the output is 2. So this gets replaced with 2. And so now the question is 2 is equal to 3 minus the square root of x. Well, 3 minus what is going to give you a value of 2. And so that means this would have to be a 1, because 3 minus 1 is 2. So is there a square root of x that would give us a 1? Yeah, x equals 1. So that answers our question. When x is 1, the output would be 2. On C, we're plugging in negative 6 wherever there's a k. So right there. So we'll say f of negative 6 is equal to negative 6 divided by 2 plus 1. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. Negative 3 plus 1 is negative 2. So f of negative 6 is equal to negative 2. So that's what it was asking for. On part D, if we plug 3 in, for x, what happens? We have the square root of 3 minus 5. Well, 3 minus 5 is negative 2. And if you go to plug that into your calculator, or you think about it, is there a number that you can multiply by itself to get negative 2? Is that possible? And the answer is no, because if you take a number times itself, that would be either a positive times a positive, which is equal to a positive, or you potentially could take a negative, but since it's the same number, it's got to be a negative times a negative, which will also be a positive. So there's no way to take the square root of negative 2. So on this particular answer, it's not possible. There is no solution in terms of finding a value or an output for this particular input. So the input here, there's a problem with it. There's some type of restriction on what numbers you can plug in for the x. So your input does not consist of all real numbers.